The evening in Chicago was calm, but inside the hospital the air was busy, filled with the sound of footsteps, beeping machines, and murmurs from patients' rooms. Nurse Emily Carter moved quickly through the long corridor, her shoes tapping against the floor. She had worked many long shifts before, but tonight felt different. Something in her heart told her that this night would stay with her for a very long time. Emily was a nurse who had earned the respect of doctors, patients, and fellow staff because of her gentle way of treating people. She never hurried through conversations with patients, and she always listened when someone needed comfort. While checking charts, she noticed a new patient admitted earlier that day. His name was Thomas Reed, an elderly man in his late 70s. His condition was serious, and the doctors knew he did not have much time left. Emily entered his room with her usual warm smile. The man looked frail, his skin pale, and his breathing heavy. But his eyes, though tired, had a kind of brightness that immediately caught her attention. "Good evening, Mr. Reed," Emily said softly. "How are you feeling?" He gave a faint smile and answered, "A little weak, but I'm glad someone came in." His voice was low, almost like a whisper, yet steady enough to show that he still carried strength inside. Over the next hour, Emily helped him settle, checked his vitals, and adjusted his blanket. Unlike some patients who asked about medication or complained about discomfort, Mr. Reed seemed more interested in talking. He asked Emily questions about her life, where she grew up, why she became a nurse, and whether she enjoyed her work. This surprised Emily. Most patients in his condition were usually quiet, but here was a man who wanted to connect. When she was about to leave, he touched her hand lightly and said, "If you have time after your shift, please sit with me. There's something important I'd like to share." Emily paused. She had heard requests like this before, but something in his tone made her nod. "I'll come back," she promised. Later, when the ward had grown quieter, she returned to his room with a chair. The dim light above his bed gave the room a peaceful feeling. Mr. Reed's eyes lit up when he saw her. "You remind me of someone," he began slowly. "My late wife. She was gentle like you." Emily smiled politely. She listened as he told stories of his younger days, how he had been a teacher in Chicago for many years. He loved books, and his students had respected him. His life sounded full of good memories, but as he spoke, Emily could sense an invisible weight behind his words, like something important was left unsaid. "Mr. Reed," she asked gently, "you seem to be carrying something. Would you like to talk about it?" He sighed, his chest rising slowly. "You are right, nurse. There's something I've hidden for too long. I don't have much time left, and I cannot leave this world with the burden still in me. I have one last wish, and I believe only you can help me." Emily was taken aback. She had never expected a patient to place such trust in her. "What is it?" she asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window where the city lights sparkled against the night sky. His eyes grew misty as he whispered, "It's something from my past. Something I locked away in my old house. If you could find it, and make sure it goes to the right hands, then I could rest in peace." Emily felt her heart tighten. She wanted to help, but also knew her responsibilities as a nurse usually did not extend outside the hospital. Still, she could not ignore the pleading in his voice. "I don't know what I can do, but if it means that much to you, I'll listen," she replied. He smiled weakly, his eyes glistening. "Thank you. But I must warn you, it will not be easy. What you discover might not be what you expect." Emily stayed with him for another hour. He told her fragments of his story about his youth, his lost opportunities, and his regrets. Though he did not reveal everything, she could feel that he was slowly building up the courage to trust her fully. When her shift ended, Emily left the hospital feeling heavy with thoughts. She had cared for hundreds of patients before, but never had one asked her for something so personal. As she walked to her car, the cool night air brushed her face. She thought of her own father, who had passed away years earlier, and how she would have wanted someone to stand by him if she couldn't. Perhaps, she thought, this was her chance to give someone that comfort. The following day, she returned to work. Mr. Reed was waiting for her, his eyes tired but alert. "You came back," he said with relief. "I promised, didn't I?" Emily smiled. This time, he shared more. He told her about his old house on the south side of Chicago, where he had lived decades ago. He hinted that something valuable was hidden there, but he didn't give full details yet. Instead, he gave her a riddle-like clue: "It's hidden where the light never reaches, but it always kept me safe." Emily wrote down the words carefully. She had no idea what they meant, but she could feel how important they were. Before she left his room, he whispered, "I trust you, Emily. Please don't fail me." His voice trembled, and for a moment Emily felt the weight of his trust fall entirely on her shoulders. She promised herself she would not let him down. That night, as she prepared for bed, her mind kept replaying his words. Who was this man beyond the walls of the hospital? What could be hidden in an abandoned house for so many years? And why had he chosen her, a nurse he had just met, to fulfill such a final request? Emily didn't know the answers yet, but she could sense that this was the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. The next morning, Emily arrived at the hospital with Mr. Reed's words still circling in her mind. She went about her usual duties, checking charts, giving medicines, speaking with families, but in the back of her head, she kept hearing his soft voice: "It's hidden where the light never reaches, but it always kept me safe." She wondered what he meant. Was it a physical object? A memory? Or something symbolic? Later that evening, she entered his room again. Mr. Reed looked weaker than the day before, his breathing shallow, his skin pale, yet his eyes were still filled with determination. He gave her a tired smile. "You came back, Nurse Emily. I was worried you might forget." Emily pulled the chair closer to his bed. "I didn't forget. I've been thinking about what you said all night. Can you tell me more about this wish of yours?" He looked at her seriously, then closed his eyes for a moment as though gathering strength. "Many years ago, I lived in a house on the south side of Chicago. Life was different then, filled with hope and dreams. But everything changed after a betrayal I never saw coming. I hid something important in that house, something I could not let anyone else find. I need you to go there and recover it for me." Emily leaned forward. "But Mr. Reed, why me? You've only known me for a short while. Don't you have family, or friends who could help you?" His eyes grew misty. "That is the problem. I had a family, but I lost them along the way. My wife passed many years ago, and my daughter, she doesn't speak to me anymore. I was too ashamed to tell her the truth of what happened. She believes I abandoned her, when in truth, I was broken and powerless. As for friends, they vanished when my fortune disappeared. You are the only one who has listened to me without judgment. I trust you, Emily. More than I've trusted anyone in decades." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't just a nurse anymore, he was placing in her hands the last thread of his story. "All right," she said quietly. "Tell me where I can find it." He gave her a slow nod. "In the basement of the house, near the furnace. There is a wall that doesn't belong. If you look closely, you will see bricks that don't match the rest. Behind them, there is a metal box. That box holds everything. But remember, what is inside may shock you." Emily wrote down the directions carefully, her heart racing. She had never been asked to do anything like this before. She wanted to say no, to tell him it wasn't her responsibility. But when she saw the look in his eyes, a mixture of desperation and hope, she knew she could not refuse. "Mr. Reed," she asked softly, "what if I find this box? What do you want me to do with it? His lips trembled as he answered, bring it to me. And if I do not live to see it, make sure it reaches my daughter, Sarah. She deserves to know the truth. She deserves to have what was stolen from both of us. The mention of his daughter's name made Emily pause. She could hear the pain in his voice, the regret that had lived inside him for years. She nodded firmly. I promise I'll do everything I can. That night, Emily left the hospital with a heavy heart. She drove home through the crowded streets of Chicago, but the noise of traffic and the glow of streetlights could not distract her from the thought of the old house. What kind of secrets lay hidden there? Why had he guarded them so carefully? She sat in her small apartment, staring at the piece of paper with his instructions. A part of her wanted to ignore it, to tell herself she was just a nurse and that this was not her burden. But another part of her compassionate, stubborn heart knew she would never forgive herself if she let his last wish go unfulfilled. The following evening, she returned to his room. He looked weaker than before, his breath slower, but when he saw her, he managed to whisper, did you think about it? Emily nodded. Yes. I'll go. Tears welled in his eyes. You don't know what this means to me. Thank you, Emily. You may be the only person who can set things right. He reached out his trembling hand, and she gently held it. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the promise hanging between them. Over the next few days, Emily planned her visit. Her shifts were long, and she couldn't just leave in the middle of work, but she managed to arrange a day off. She searched for the address he had given her, and when she found it, she saw that the house was still standing, though it looked old and neglected in the photographs online. The South Side neighborhood where it sat had changed over the years, but some buildings still carried the heavy air of forgotten times. The day before her trip, she sat again with Mr. Reed. He seemed restless, as though time was slipping away faster than he expected. Emily, he whispered, you must understand something. What you find may not look like much at first. But it represents everything I lost. Don't give up until you have the box. Emily promised again. She could see how much hope he was placing in her. She wanted to ask more questions, what exactly was inside, why he had hidden it, how his daughter would react, but she could tell he wasn't ready to reveal everything. Perhaps he wanted her to discover it for herself. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, imagining herself walking through the dusty halls of an abandoned house, searching for a hidden box. She pictured what might be inside: family photographs, love letters, or maybe legal documents. But she also remembered his warning, what you discover might not be what you expect. When morning came, she packed a small bag with gloves, a flashlight, and a notebook. As she locked her door, she felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She had no idea what she was stepping into, but she knew one thing: she could not let Mr. Reed down. Back at the hospital before leaving, she checked in on him one last time. His breathing was labored, but his eyes opened when he sensed her presence. Are you going? He asked. Yes, she whispered. I'll bring it back. A faint smile crossed his lips. Then I can rest easier. Emily gave his hand a gentle squeeze before walking away, her heart pounding. She knew this journey wasn't about her anymore. It was about honoring the final wish of a man who had carried secrets for too long. As she drove through the city streets toward the south side, the buildings grew older, the sidewalks cracked, and the air heavier. She could feel the weight of history pressing in on her. Somewhere ahead stood the house where Mr. Reed's past was waiting, silent and untouched, holding truths that could either heal or break the people he left behind. Emily gripped the steering wheel tighter. She was just a nurse, an ordinary woman, but tonight, she was also the keeper of a dying man's hope. She whispered to herself, I won't fail him. And with that, she pressed forward, unaware that what she was about to uncover would change her life forever. The morning sky was gray when Emily set out for the south side of Chicago. The city looked different here, older, quieter, almost forgotten by time. Streets that once might have been lively now felt tired, with cracked sidewalks and abandoned buildings lining the blocks. She followed the address Mr. Reed had given her, her heart pounding harder with every turn. When she finally reached the house, she parked her car a few feet away and sat for a moment, staring at it. The building looked like it had been asleep for years. Its paint had peeled off, the wooden porch sagged under its own weight, and weeds grew high in the yard. Broken shutters hung loosely, moving slightly with the wind. It was the kind of place most people would pass by without a second glance, but for Emily, it was the center of a dying man's last hope. She stepped out of her car, the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes echoing in the empty street. For a second, she hesitated. She was a nurse, not an adventurer. What was she doing here, standing in front of an abandoned house with a note in her pocket and a promise in her heart? But then she remembered Mr. Reed's frail voice, his eyes filled with trust, and she straightened her back. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. The front door creaked loudly as she pushed it open. Dust filled the air, and the smell of damp wood and age hit her immediately. She covered her mouth with her sleeve and stepped inside. The floor groaned under her weight, as though warning her to tread carefully. Sunlight filtered through broken windows, casting shadows that made the house feel alive, as if it were watching her. Emily switched on her small flashlight. The beam revealed faded wallpaper peeling from the walls, old furniture covered in sheets, and photographs in broken frames lying scattered on the floor. She felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the heavy sense of history that clung to the air. This was once a home filled with life, laughter, and memories. Now it was nothing but silence. She remembered the instructions, in the basement, near the furnace. Look for a wall that doesn't belong. The staircase leading down to the basement was narrow and steep. Each step moaned as she placed her weight on it, dust rising around her shoes. She gripped the railing tightly, praying it wouldn't give way. When she reached the bottom, the air grew colder, the kind of cold that clung to her skin and sent chills down her arms. Her flashlight swept across the basement. It was cluttered with old boxes, rusted tools, and cobwebs hanging like curtains. In the corner stood a large, rusted furnace, its mouth dark and empty. Emily's heart quickened. This had to be the place. She walked closer, shining her light along the wall near the furnace. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The bricks all looked the same, dark, worn, and covered in dust. But as she traced the beam slowly across the wall, something caught her eye. A small section of bricks looked slightly different, lighter in color, less worn than the others, as if they had been added later. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch them. The bricks felt loose. She pressed harder, and one of them shifted slightly. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. Using both hands, she carefully pulled at the bricks. One by one, they came free, revealing a hollow space behind the wall. The space was small, but just large enough to hide something. She leaned closer, her flashlight trembling in her grip. Inside, tucked away in the darkness, was a rusted metal box. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She pulled the box out, coughing as dust rose into the air. It was heavy, the metal cold against her skin. The lock on it was broken, rusted with age, and with a little effort, she managed to pry it open. Inside, she found stacks of old photographs, each one faded but still holding life in their images. She saw pictures of a younger Mr. Reed with his wife, smiling proudly beside their little daughter. The family looked happy, full of love. Emily's chest tightened as she thought of how far away that joy must have felt to him now. Next, she pulled out a bundle of letters, carefully tied with a ribbon that had long since lost its color. She opened one gently. The handwriting was neat but shaky, filled with words of love and longing. They were letters from Mr. Reed to his daughter, letters that had never been sent. Each one began with "My dearest Sarah" and ended with promises that one day, the truth would be told. Emily's eyes blurred with tears as she realized how much pain he must have carried, keeping these words hidden for so many years. At the bottom of the box lay something heavier, a sealed envelope filled with old bonds and documents. Emily's eyes widened as she saw the numbers printed on them. They were worth millions of dollars, untouched and forgotten for decades. She flipped through legal papers and realized that they weren't just bonds, they were deeds, showing that Mr. Reed once owned several properties in Chicago. Properties that had been taken from him unjustly. Emily's hands shook as she pieced it together. This wasn't just a box of memories. It was evidence. Proof of a man's stolen life, his hidden wealth, his silenced story. She sat on the cold basement floor, clutching the letters and papers, her mind racing. She had come expecting a small family keepsake, maybe a diary or a piece of jewelry. But this was far bigger. This was enough to change the story of Mr. Reed's life, enough to restore his name and give his daughter the truth she had been denied. For a long while, Emily stayed there, staring at the contents of the box. Dust floated in the flashlight's beam, and the silence of the basement pressed in on her. She felt the weight of the discovery settle on her shoulders. It wasn't just about fulfilling a patient's last wish anymore. It was about justice. It was about bringing light to a truth that had been buried where the light never reached. Finally, she closed the box carefully, her hands steady now. She knew what she had to do. Mr. Reed needed to see this, even if only for a short time before his final breath. And if he didn't live long enough, then his daughter had to know the truth. Emily carried the box upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. She left the house quietly, locking the door behind her, as if she were sealing away the past one last time. When she placed the box on the passenger seat of her car, she looked at it for a long moment. The rusted metal box looked ordinary, but inside it lay the story of a man's life, his love, his loss, his betrayal, and his hope for redemption. As she drove back through the streets of Chicago, the city lights flickered past her windows, but her mind was somewhere else. She thought of Mr. Reed lying in his hospital bed, waiting, hoping. She thought of Sarah, the daughter who had grown up without knowing the full truth. And she thought of herself, an ordinary nurse now carrying the power to change lives. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. She whispered into the night, "I found it, Mr. Reed. I'll bring it back to you." But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The box had been found, yes, but the truth inside it was about to open a door to something far greater, something that would shock everyone who learned it. Emily returned to the hospital with the rusted metal box resting carefully on the passenger seat beside her. Every red light on the way back felt like a delay she couldn't afford. She kept glancing at the box as if it might vanish or change before she could deliver it. The discovery still weighed heavily on her heart. Photographs of a happy family, unsent letters written with love and regret, and documents worth more than she could have imagined. What she carried was not just metal and paper, it was decades of silence waiting to be broken. When she entered Mr. Reed's room, the beeping of the machines reminded her how little time was left. His skin was paler than before, and his chest rose with difficulty. Emily placed the box gently on the bedside table. The moment he noticed it, his tired eyes widened, and his lips trembled. "You found it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Yes," Emily said softly. "It was exactly where you said it would be. Hidden behind the bricks in the basement." Tears welled in his eyes. He reached out a shaking hand, and Emily lifted the box onto his lap. His fingers, thin and fragile, traced the rusty edges as though greeting an old friend. Slowly, with effort, he opened it. The photographs lay on top. He picked one up with unsteady hands and stared at it for a long time. It was a picture of him as a young man with his wife and their little girl standing between them. His thumb brushed over the image of the child. "My Sarah," he whispered. His eyes glistened as he closed them. "I haven't seen this photo in decades. She must have been 6 here. Look at her smile, so full of life." Emily sat beside him silently, her heart heavy. He set the photograph down and untied the ribbon around the letters. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink faded but still clear enough to read. He unfolded one letter slowly and read aloud, his voice breaking, "My dearest Sarah, not a day passes that I don't think of you. I wish I could explain why I cannot be by your side. Please believe that I love you more than anything in this world." His hands shook as he stopped reading, unable to continue. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he pressed the letter to his chest. "She never saw these," he said. "I wrote them all, but I could never send them. I was too ashamed. I thought she wouldn't forgive me." Emily felt her own eyes sting. "She deserves to know, Mr. Reed. She deserves to hear your truth." He nodded weakly, then reached deeper into the box, pulling out the envelope of bonds and property deeds. His fingers lingered on the papers as though they were burning him. "This," he whispered, "was my downfall. I was once a man of means. These properties, these bonds, they were mine. But I trusted the wrong person. A business partner I called a friend. He tricked me, forged my name, and stripped everything away. I fought at first, but the legal system was against me. By the time I realized how deep the betrayal went, it was too late. I lost everything: my fortune, my home, even the respect of those around me. I couldn't face my daughter like that. How could I let her see me broken?" His voice grew weaker with each word. Emily leaned closer, listening carefully. "So I hid it all. I locked away the proof, the letters, everything. I told myself that one day I'd return for it, one day I'd set things right. But years passed, and shame grew heavier than hope. I never went back. I let her believe I had abandoned her." His chest shook with the weight of his confession. "Do you see, Emily? This box is not just about money. It is about truth. It is about giving my daughter the father she never truly knew." Emily placed a hand on his arm gently. "It isn't too late. You may not be able to change the past, but you can still give her the truth now. You can give her these letters, these papers, and show her who you really were." He turned his head toward her, eyes filled with sorrow. "Do you think she will forgive me?" "I think," Emily said softly, "that every child carries a space in their heart for their parent. That space never disappears, no matter how much time passes. She may be hurt, but she deserves the chance to know you loved her. And you deserve the chance to tell her." His lips trembled into a weak smile. "You speak with such kindness. I wish you had been there in my life earlier. Perhaps I would not have hidden for so long." Emily stayed by his side as he went through the contents of the box, one by one. Every photograph brought back a memory, every letter reminded him of the years he had lost. The documents proved his story: deeds and bonds that showed his life had been stolen. He looked at Emily and whispered, "You must promise me something." "What is it?" she asked. "If I cannot hold on long enough to see Sarah, you must deliver this to her yourself. She deserves her inheritance. She deserves to know her father's love and his truth. Promise me, Emily." Emily's throat tightened. She could see how important this was, how his entire soul rested on her answer. She nodded firmly. "I promise." His eyes closed in relief, a single tear slipping down his cheek. "Then I can finally let go of the fear that has chained me for so long." The next day, Emily began searching for Sarah. With the help of a social worker at the hospital, she found records that led to her current address. She lived only a few miles away, still in Chicago. Emily couldn't help but wonder if Sarah had ever thought of her father, if she had grown up believing he didn't care. When Emily returned to Mr. Reed's room with the news, his face lit up with a faint glow of hope. "So close," he whispered. "She has been so close all this time, and I never had the courage to reach out." His breathing grew shallow, and Emily realized time was slipping away. She sat with him through the night, holding his hand whenever he stirred. In his weakest moments, he would whisper Sarah's name, as though calling out to her even in his dreams. By morning, Emily knew she had to act quickly. She could not let his final wish remain unfulfilled. She reached out to Sarah directly, explaining only that her father was in the hospital and that he wanted to see her. At first, Sarah hesitated. The years of absence had built walls around her heart. But something in Emily's voice, earnest, pleading, softened her. She agreed to come. When Emily told Mr. Reed, his eyes filled with both joy and fear. "What if she hates me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Then at least she will know the truth," Emily replied gently. "And knowing the truth is better than never knowing at all." That evening, Emily sat by his bed as he held the letters in his hands. "If she comes," he whispered, "and I don't have the strength to explain, give her these. Tell her I loved her. Tell her I never stopped." Emily's heart ached as she nodded. She knew the reunion, whether joyous or painful, would mark the end of his long silence. As the machines beeped softly around them and the city lights flickered outside the window, Emily realized she was witnessing not just the story of a man but the story of redemption, one last chance for a father to give his daughter the truth he had hidden for a lifetime. And with that thought, she held his hand a little tighter, waiting for the moment when Sarah would finally walk through the door. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the monitors. Emily sat by Mr. Reed's bedside, holding the rusted metal box on her lap. The weight of it felt heavier than ever, because now it carried not only the story of his past but also the hope of what might happen next. She had spoken with Sarah that morning, and after a long pause on the phone, Sarah had agreed to come. Emily didn't know what would unfold when father and daughter faced each other after so many years, but she knew it would be life-changing. Mr. Reed was drifting in and out of sleep, his breathing shallow and uneven. His lips moved now and then, whispering Sarah's name like a prayer. Emily leaned forward and said softly, "She's coming, Mr. Reed. Your daughter is coming." A faint smile touched his lips, though his eyes stayed closed. It was as though his heart could rest a little easier knowing that the bridge between him and his daughter might finally be rebuilt. Hours later, the door to the room opened slowly. A woman in her early 40s stepped in, her expression guarded. Sarah Reed had her father's eyes but carried herself with firmness, the kind of strength born from years of surviving disappointment. She paused at the doorway, uncertain if she should walk in. Emily stood, setting the box on the chair. "You must be Sarah," she said warmly. Sarah nodded slightly. "Yes. You're the one who called me." Her gaze shifted to the frail figure in the bed. Her face softened for a moment, then tightened again, as though she wasn't ready to let down her guard. Is that really my father?" Emily stepped closer to her. "Yes. He's very weak, but he's been waiting for you. He never stopped thinking about you, Sarah." Sarah hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "He left us. I grew up believing he didn't care. Do you know how hard it was for me? For my mother?" Emily nodded gently. "I can't imagine how much pain you've carried. But there are things you don't know, truths he never had the courage to tell you. He wanted to explain before it was too late." She gestured toward the box. "Everything is here. Letters, photographs, proof of what happened. But more than that, he wanted to tell you himself." Sarah looked at the box, then at her father again. For a long moment, she stood frozen. Finally, with slow steps, she walked toward the bed. Mr. Reed stirred, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw her, his face lit with both joy and disbelief. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice so faint it was almost a breath. "My Sarah." Tears sprang into Sarah's eyes despite her efforts to stay composed. She stood beside the bed, her hands clenched together. "You look so different. I barely recognize you." "I'm sorry," he said weakly, reaching out a trembling hand. "I failed you. I failed to explain. I failed to be the father you deserved." Sarah swallowed hard, her emotions warring inside her. "All these years, I thought you didn't want me. I thought you just walked away." His eyes filled with tears. "No, I never stopped loving you. I was ashamed. I lost everything, our home, my fortune, my pride. I didn't want you to see me broken. I thought hiding was better than facing you with nothing. But it was a mistake. The worst mistake of my life." Sarah's lips trembled. She turned to Emily, who quietly placed the letters in her hands. Sarah looked down at them. The first envelope read, "My dearest Sarah." Her fingers shook as she opened one and began to read. The words were filled with love, sorrow, and regret. Each sentence carried the weight of a father's heart that had never stopped beating for his child. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her cheeks. She looked back at her father, her voice breaking. "You should have sent these. I would have forgiven you. I just needed to know you cared. I was a coward," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "But I want to make it right now. The box, it has everything. Your inheritance, the truth of what was stolen from us. It belongs to you. More than the money, I want you to know that you were always my greatest treasure." Sarah sat down, taking his hand gently in hers. For the first time in decades, father and daughter were connected again. "I don't need the money," she whispered. "I just needed this moment. I needed to hear you say that I mattered." "You always mattered," he whispered back, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Every day, every moment." The room was silent except for their quiet sobs and the steady rhythm of the monitor. Emily stepped back, giving them space. Her heart swelled as she watched the walls between them crumble. For the next hour, they talked. Mr. Reed shared stories from the past, memories Sarah had never heard. He told her about her mother, about how much he had loved their little family, and about the betrayal that had stolen everything. Sarah listened, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling through her tears. It was as if years of distance were being bridged with every word spoken. As the evening grew darker, Mr. Reed's strength faded. His grip on Sarah's hand weakened, but his eyes never left her face. "I can go in peace now," he whispered. "I've seen you. I've told you the truth. That's all I ever wanted." Sarah leaned closer, her tears falling onto his blanket. "I forgive you, Dad. I forgive you for everything." Those words brought a smile to his lips. With one final breath, he whispered her name, and then, peacefully, he closed his eyes. The monitor fell silent. Sarah clung to his hand, sobbing quietly, while Emily stood beside her, her own eyes wet with tears. In that moment, the room held both sorrow and peace, the sorrow of loss and the peace of a truth finally spoken. Days later, Emily helped Sarah go through the box carefully. Together, they reviewed the deeds and bonds. With legal guidance, Sarah was able to reclaim much of what had once belonged to her father. But more important than the wealth was the restoration of his honor. His name, once clouded by silence and misunderstanding, was cleared. Sarah held onto the letters most of all. She placed them in a small chest at her home, reading them whenever she missed him. They were her proof that her father's love had never died, even when he had failed to show it. As for Emily, the experience changed her deeply. She had started as a nurse simply doing her duty, but she had ended up becoming the keeper of a man's final wish and the bridge between a father and his daughter. She realized that nursing was not only about medicine and treatment but also about listening to the stories people carried, stories that sometimes mattered more than the illness itself. One evening, Sarah visited Emily at the hospital to thank her again. "You didn't just help my father," she said. "You gave me back a piece of my life I thought was gone forever. You gave me the chance to say goodbye with love instead of anger." Emily smiled warmly. "Your father gave you that gift. I only helped deliver it." They embraced, and Sarah left with the box, carrying her father's truth into her future. From that day on, Emily often thought of Mr. Reed whenever she met a new patient. She reminded herself that every person lying in a hospital bed had a story, a history, and sometimes even a hidden wish waiting to be fulfilled. And she promised herself she would always listen. Because sometimes, the greatest healing came not from medicine, but from love, forgiveness, and the courage to uncover the truth.